Give me the nod when we're live, John. Keith.
We are live.
Well,
Okay.
for some strange reason, my background's and look mirror writing.
Right, I'm going to leave it.
It doesn't
like
work
that.
very well with your background, Martin, I'm afraid.
No.
All right, shall we make a start then? I think we are live at the moment, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to Chearsley Parish Council December meeting. Let's start with apologies for absence, please, if we could. As far as I'm aware, we have Helen and Nick. I think that's it. The rest of us are here.
And Robert?
Oh, and Robert, yes. Thank you, Keith. So before we go any further, I'll just explain briefly how this evening is going to work. This is a special meeting for it's the annual Parish Council budget setting meeting. And as a result of that, we have a very cut down agenda, the only item being the approval of the budget for 21-22. As a result of that, we only have one parishioners question time session that will come at the end to give anybody who wishes a chance to ask questions on what they've heard during the course of the meeting. So on the agenda, we have the apologies. The next item is declarations of interest. This is the usual in accordance with section 303. Does anybody have any interests that they feel a need to declare for this evening?
No, not for me.
No.
No.
Okay, nor for me, so thank you for that. The next item is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Because it's a cut down meeting, I agreed with Nick and Helen that we wouldn't actually do matters arising, but we would at least just put on record our approval of the minutes. So does anybody have any errors or omissions that they think need making to those minutes? And if not, could I have a proposal for adoption, please?
Well, I go just to suggest that the matters arising are deferred until the January meeting, so they're not lost.
Indeed so, yeah, that was the plan, Paul, yes.
Yeah, I propose we accept them and approve them.
Thanks, Keith.
Seconded.
Thank you, Martin. So the minutes are approved. So on then to the substantive item for this evening, which is the budget for 2021-22. The process we've gone through this year on the budget has been a little bit different to the one we've used in previous years. And I think we all feel as a parish council that it's probably been a better arrangement. So what we did was about a month ago, we all got together informally as a parish council to consider the topics that we felt should be on our agenda for next financial year, the things we wanted to achieve, the things we thought we would wish to spend money on and that we would have to spend money on. So we drew up a programme for the year. And then on Tuesday of this week, we met again informally to look at that programme and to put some numbers against it and thereby to work out what we thought was an appropriate budget for next year. And the intention for this evening is to just go through that budget, just briefly to outline all of the items that are on there. And then at the end of it, assuming colleagues have got no further questions, and that's always possible, of course, thoughts may have occurred since Tuesday. We can take any further questions and then we will see whether we're in a position to approve it. So what I'm going to do now is to pull up a copy of that budget, if I can share the screen successfully here. So first question, can everybody on the call see that copy of the budget?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So the layout is fairly standard. we are starting, we believe, based on our current estimates, we think we will have a balance of somewhere in the region of £58,000 in the bank next year. Now that sounds a very large amount. The main reason why it's larger than some folk might think it should be is the fact that we have in there an accumulating fund that we've been setting aside for the last couple of years for expenditure on improvements to the Horse Chestnut Island junction. And I'll talk more about that a bit later on. So the 58,000 comprises about £32,000 in that fund and a general reserve of 26,000. The reason the general reserve might be a bit higher than we might have expected is down really to the fact that it's been a bit of a strange year. Activities haven't been at the level we might have expected. And so expenditure in the current year is going to be a bit less than we expected last year, leaving the balance a bit higher. That's about all I can say of the current year. In terms of the income, I'm going to come back to the precept at the end. I know it's written at the top of the page, but it's probably easier to explain that and the other income at the end. I'm going to start by going through the expenditure that we think we are going to incur that year. One of the largest items is our administrative expenditure. There's an indication there of the items that covers. There are other smaller things as well, but they're the main items. And these are costs that we have to incur just to exist, really. And it's they've been at about this level, a little lower maybe, but broadly around that level for about the last 3 years now. Other regular items, each year we have a programme of grass cutting around the village, which anybody watching, I imagine, will notice. That's roughly the amount we've spent in previous years, so that hasn't changed. We have to get the dog and salt bins either topped up or emptied, depending on the bin. There's a number of items of small maintenance that we do. This isn't major project work, but it's things like keeping the benches on the green in good order, just as an example. We have an amount of expenditure on IT, so it's subscriptions to the various operating systems and programs that we use, and also typically the Zoom subscription by which we hold these meetings, and consumables such as printer cartridges and the like. Events, the main events are Remembrance Day, and the expenditure there is the wreath, and this year, because of the absence of a poppy appeal, we chose to make a donation to the Royal British Legion. Our feeling is that having done that, we feel that's a good and right thing to be doing, and so we're anticipating continuing that next year. So it's Remembrance Day, and then the other main event is the Christmas tree, the tree itself, and lights and any other related expenditure. The other item we've got under regular costs this year, which we haven't shown in the past, is drain clearance. Now, we have put some effort this year into trying to get Bucks Council focus on the drains in the village. We're aware that there is quite a lot of difficulty with some of them. They block much more regularly and easily than we would wish, and we have had to put some money in the current year into having some work done on them. We believe that this is an expenditure that Bucks Council should cover, but of course they have their own priorities and pressures on their budgets. So whilst we are continuing to try and get Bucks Council to do the work that's necessary for us, we are in conversation with them. We have nevertheless put a sum of money aside in the event that we judge that there are problems that have just got to be dealt with. So we've got some money there to deal with it if we need to. And again, it's possible that that might become a regular cost. So that's all of our regular work, the admin and all of the bits and pieces that we do around the village on a regular basis. Moving on from that, next year, we hope, is election year. Both the current year and the year before were meant to be election years, but for various reasons, the elections were postponed. The expectation now is that they will be held next May, and there will be some costs that the council incurs through the staff that Bucks Council have to provide to resource that election.
Worthwhile just mentioning, John, that it was not us that postponed the parish council elections. It was the powers that be above us.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, a very good point to make. It was nothing to do with us. We've all been trying to get out for a couple of years. Next major item, village tree maintenance. Now, this has now become a major and significant part of our work programme. We've, after a couple of years of hard work by Paul in particular and Ian recently helping, we've got a grip now on the number of trees around the village for which we think the parish council has to take a responsibility. And we've had, I think, 3 years now of fairly good tree maintenance, and there's more needed. We've already identified quite a number of trees that will need attention next year, and hence a fairly substantial sum of money into the budget to cover that. Signage in the village centre. There are a couple of areas of signage that we've been looking at that we think need attention. One we've had in mind for some time is to try and put some pedestrian direction signs in the village centre to key village locations, such as the village hall, the church, maybe the shop, and maybe even the bell, and anywhere else we can think of. So that will appear, we hope, next year. And we're also aware that some of the footpath signs around the village are in a bit of a sorry state. Again, arguably not a parish council responsibility, but it's difficult to know who would stand up to it. So we took the view that, as with other things, for not too great an expenditure, we can improve the look of the village in some areas there. Now, the big expenditure next year potentially is this one. As anybody watching will probably be aware, we've been talking for a while now about making some improvements to the Horse Chestnut Island junction. We're all aware of the difficulties caused by the layout of that junction, difficulties that to some extent are safety related. They certainly encourage speeding across the junction, and there is also a lot of damage from heavy vehicles. I mentioned earlier on that we've been putting some money aside. That was this money up here. And we're now in a position, we think, where we may be able to get this work done next year. We've already put in an application to Bucks Council for some funding assistance with this. And we've got some reason to be optimistic that that funding may be forthcoming. However, in order to get that, there's an obligation on us to demonstrate that we are putting some of our own funding in. And so we have offered up £25,000 as a contribution to Bucks Council. And if the work goes ahead, that will be accepted, with Bucks Council putting in all probability, significantly more than that to get the work done. So that's a good step forward. The fact that we've had in principle agreement to it, but there are still a couple more steps to go through before it's all confirmed that the work will be done. But it's looking good at the moment. And for that reason, we have decided to pull down £25,000 from the 32,000 into the budget for the current year as expenditure. Next item, grants. The Parish Council is empowered under what's called the Section 137 provisions. Provisions of whatever act it is governs the activities of Parish Council. I probably should know, but don't. And that section enables the Parish Council to donate up to £8.32 per year per elector in grants to causes that it considers to be deserving on the basis of being of merit and interest and relevance to the village itself. So we have budgeted the £1,700 represents just over half of what we could spend at maximum. We don't expect to spend anywhere near the maximum, so we've just put £1,700 in the event it's needed. The Stockel, this is the Stockel in Church Lane. We've talked for some years about maybe doing some major improvement works there. That is still a possibility, but that's not what this money is for. This is just for minor maintenance work, largely underground work. We've managed to get a fair bit of work done on it this year to patch it up and prevent some of the water leaks that are there. And we've budgeted a small sum just in the event that we do need a bit more next year. We would like to do more work there, but it's something that needs getting a grip of. And at the moment, we've taken the view that the Parish Council and our officers just don't have the capacity to take that on along with all the other things on this budget. So we've taken the view that, desirable though it is, we probably won't be able to do much more with it unless we can find somebody in the village who's willing to take it on as a project. And one of the first things that any such person would need to do would be to go and see what grant funding is available to help. So still sort of in the background, but we're not budgeting anything for it next year. One thing we are doing, the next one, is constantly trying to look at improvements to the footpaths around the village. And Anthony Adams has done a survey, or is in the middle of a survey, to look at the gates on the various footpaths. And where he's got to so far, he's concluded that at the moment it looks if we need 19 gates replacing at those sort of costs. So the assumption is that we wouldn't try and do that all in 1 year. It would probably be spread over 3 years, we're assuming. And for that, we put £2,000 into the budget for next year to make a start. We have a lot of ambitions for the village verges. Ian is leading on this one for us with Rose and Paul, and the plan is to try and develop the verges so that we have a more controlled growth, but a more natural growth. And to help us to actually do that work, we have taken on a contractor who has been working with us in the current year. He's done a great job for us, and we've decided that we're going to maintain his services next year. So we've got some hands ready to do the work that we plan, and that's what we're budgeting for payments to that contractor. Next big item, curbing. It's an area that we're always looking at. Almost wherever you look in the village, you can identify areas that would benefit from improvements to curbing or new curbing. So we've put a lump sum in of £18,000 to cover whatever we might decide to do next year. Very broadly, we arrived at that figure by saying we can probably manage about 3 such projects at most in a year at a price of somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 each. So maybe more, maybe less, but that's an average. That takes us to roughly £18,000. The areas we're looking at are, there's quite a lot of curbing damage around the Horse Chestnut Island. Now, we've already had a quotation for that work of almost £8,000, I think. We were going to get that done and get on. We've actually sort of engaged with a contractor to do the work, but we've now realised that if we're going to spend this large money up here on the junction improvements, it could well be that that overlaps with some of this work. So we decided not to go ahead with it just at the moment until we see what's happening with HCI and work out then how much of that work we still need to do. It's probably going to be less than the amount we've got a quote for at the moment. Besides that, we've got some damage in Shops Lane, where we've got a bit of a parking issue. We've got a difficulty around the Stockwell, where we've got a drain overflowing in where Shops Lane joins Church Lane, and it's causing damage around the Stockwell bank, and there may be benefit in putting some curbing in there. There's a lot of damage up on Winchton Road that's been there for a while. This is a bit beyond the junction. And we're also aware that there are a number of other areas around the sunken lanes that might benefit from expenditure to protect the banks. One example being in Dark Lane, opposite where the Rosary is. So these are candidates. We're not making any firm decisions at the moment, but they're the sort of areas we'll be looking at that we can think of at the moment, at least, where that £18,000 may be spent. Moving on, most people in the village, I hope by now, will have noticed the speed indicator device that was on the Aylesbury Road. It's recently been moved to the Crendon Road. It's had a significant impact, we believe, on speeding. It's the judgment of those that live in the area is that it has resulted in a reduction in vehicle speeds. And at the moment, we've got poles located on each of the 4 roads coming into the village, and our plan is to move the one around. But we take the view that its effectiveness warrants expenditure on a second device, and that's what that's all about. And in fact, we may even do that in the current year rather than leaving it till next year. Neighbourhood plan. This is another area that the parish council is conscious that we need to look at. This is all part of the planning system. This is different to the village plan that some of you may remember we worked on, I don't know, 5-6 years ago now maybe. But the neighbourhood plan is a statutory document, and once developed and approved, then it does have weight in the planning process. And the parish council takes the view that with changes to the planning system that are in the air, it may well be we take the view that we feel that the village does need the protection of its own neighbourhood plan. Our thinking has partly been informed by the fact that Cuddington recently came to the same conclusion, and they are in the process of getting their plan approved at the moment. So we don't know exactly how much it will cost. We do know there will be cost incurred, although there are also grants. So we budgeted £2,500 to enable us to get on and do that work, should we decide to do so. And finally, the subject of CCTV in the village was mentioned at the last parish council meeting. We haven't yet decided if we're going to do it. There is still some discussion required. It may be that we decide to go ahead, it may be not, but we decided just to put £500 in there in the budget, just in case we need some expenditure either to get it going if we decide, or even to help us work out if we want to do it or not. So it's far from a definite decision to do it. I want to emphasize that point. But we have put some money in the budget, a small amount, just in the event that we need it. So that's the budget. That expenditure comes to almost £76,000. So looking at that expenditure, we then took the view that we do need at the end of the year to maintain some reserves. And we've been looking at a figure somewhere around 15% of expenditure. And in addition, there will be some money still in the HCI fund. I'll go back up to the top in a moment so you can remind yourself where that number comes from. But those two result in a balance of about just under £19,000. When you look at those two figures together, and you look at what you're starting with, which is way up at the top, if I go back up to the top of the document, when you're looking at that, then you end up concluding that you need to set a precept of about £35,000. That's also allowing for the fact that we'll have about £1,500 of VAT refunds next year. So looking at those numbers in the round, we talked about it the other night. We're mindful of the fact that we want to keep the parish precept as low as we reasonably can, but also mindful that we believe that people in the village do want us to get on and make this set of improvements, or to continue with our programme of improvements to the village. On that basis, our recommendation, or the recommendation to this meeting, is that we maintain the precept at £35,000, which is the same as in the current year. So I think that's it. The recommendation to this meeting on the basis of that budget is A, that we adopt that as next year's budget, and B, that we thereby adopt a precept of £35,000. So that's it. What I'll do now is just invite colleagues to add anything they wish, or ask any questions they wish that may have occurred, things that I might have missed, or things that I could have perhaps made clear as I've gone through. Anybody want to say anything? Keith?
Can Julia go first, because I know she's short of time.
Oh, sorry.
I've lost
you.
No, that's okay, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave the meeting, but I fully support the proposed budget for this next financial year.
Okay, thank you, Julia.
Is that okay? I'm very sorry.
No, you said you had to be off at 8, so that's understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I've only got minor commentary. I was going to say, but Julia's gone, that we could take a vote before adding any other comments. But no, I was just going to say, I think it's very well set out. I think the one point I wanted to make was on the CCTV. That could be there may be some strong opinions in the village, either for or against. So definitely want to encourage any parishioners watching or who watch this on the replay to express their opinions, and also potentially look at the last parish council meeting where we had very interesting discussion from Paul Davis, chairman of Long Crendon PC, who really explained the benefits that they're getting from CCTV. So, but again, just to emphasise, we would very much welcome input and opinions, and we can supply more information as well on that. So that's all I had to say, John.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
John, just a quick, can the budget be taken down now, or are you leaving it there? Because I can't see anybody, but which feels...
Okay, yes, I can take that down.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, just so strange. I was just
PC or something to get
just to say, John, thank you for your hard work on this, because I think this is a far more robust. Well, this always sounds we haven't had a robust process, but I think the extra layer of meetings we've had and the debate has actually got us to a situation where I think there's more accord than, perhaps, we've certainly had some areas of disagreement in the past, although we've ended up with a solution on this occasion. I think having started the process early, got all the views on board at a much earlier stage, it's been a far more professional approach, actually, and robust, and I hope that our parishioners understand where we've come from, and I think we've ended up with a good balance where we acknowledge the fact that times are tight, but equally there is a requirement for us to move forward with a lot of these projects.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
And fully support the budget, which obviously has we pulled together.
Anybody else? Yes, John.
Yeah, I'd just like to, well, not really to add anything to what you've said. I think we've had a very good discussion. We've batted the issues around in 2 separate meetings, and we reached a consensus on Tuesday night, and I think you've summarized the situation very, very clearly, and well done for that. And this is where we stand as a parish council, for our community in the village. This is our considered recommendation for next year's programme.
Okay, thank you, John. Martin?
Yes, I'd like John, I've got nothing to add. I'm very happy with the budget you've produced, and thanks very much for all the work you've done, and I fully support it.
Thank you, Martin. Right, so I think then we can move to a formal vote. As we've agreed, we do things by a show of hands, so I think we can take it that Julia was in favour from what she just said. So can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour of adopting the budget? That would seem to be unanimous. Very well, thank you, colleagues. So the next item on the agenda is the parishioners' question time. I don't know whether we've had any questions.
Oh, yes. One has just come in on email.
Okay.
Tony Babington. The proposed work, good evening. The proposed work at the Horse Chestnut Island, is the objective of this to make life easier or harder for HGVs? Question. However, all good work and you all need to be commended. Thanks, Tony. So the question is the objective of the HCI work to make life easier or harder for HGVs? So I just think a quick summary, John, of the purpose of the HCI changes again.
Okay. So Tony, I'm assuming based on that you are listening at the moment. If not, you'll hear us on replay, no doubt. So thanks for your vote of thanks. That's much appreciated always. In terms of the island, it's a fairly complex story there. Very broadly speaking, if I try and summarise the position, the main thrust of the improvement works will be to address the safety issues which result from the kind of the straight line entry and exit between Winchenden Road and Crendon Road across that junction, coupled with the fact that you have to crane your neck left to see what's coming from the Cuddington direction, and also coupled with the fact that there is a tendency of some vehicles to try and shoot down to the left and jump round in front of vehicles in front of them in the queue. So there are definite safety issues, and addressing those issues is probably the primary purpose. Another purpose is related to speeding, and again it's the layout of the junction which tends to encourage vehicles on that main route, on the Crendon Road, Winchenden Road route, to travel through the village faster than they should do on the basis that they've got a straight run ahead of them. So speeding and safety are going to be the main items that the changes will address. Now, to get to the question of freight, it's unlikely that anything that we can do on that junction is going to significantly impact the fact that heavy vehicles have got a difficult turn to make, and therefore have got the potential for damaging the curbing and causing hold-ups. But we've got a completely separate initiative running to try and address that problem. And that initiative involves work we're doing with the community board of Buckinghamshire Council. And the board has set up a freight working group. And in addition, there is a project running called the Waddesdon Freight Project, with a separate origin, but with the same objective. The objective being to try and reduce the number of heavy vehicles on the Buckinghamshire country lanes. And our judgment is that we stand more chance of controlling that traffic, reducing it to some extent, and maybe even getting some operators to use smaller vehicles. We stand much more chance of meeting those objectives by working via those two projects than anything that we would be able to achieve by making changes to the junction. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, Tony. Does it make it easier? Does it make it more difficult? I don't think we really want to do either of those things. We certainly don't want to make it easier to encourage vehicles, but we don't want it to make it more difficult, because that's just inviting more problem. And certainly I've come to the conclusion, I think others as well, that, as I say, you won't address the freight issue by changes to that junction. And that's why we're actively working on this other project. So not a direct answer, I know, but I hope it explains the background thinking.
Okay, there's no other questions that I can see, John, on any channels.
Very well. In that case, I think that brings us to the date and time of our next meeting, which is Monday, the 18th of January.
Yep.
At 7:30. That will be a normal parish council meeting. It again will be operated over Zoom, because we're not liable to be clear of pandemic issues by then. So I'll draw the meeting to a close. Obviously, if anybody watching or on recording thinks of other questions, then you know how to get hold of us. We're very accessible. You know the methods. Ping us a message or an email at the parish council, and we will endeavour to get an answer out to you. Other than that, I think thank you, colleagues, for your help on the budget setting process. It was a good process, as you say, Paul, and it's resulted only from a good cooperative effort by everybody, which was a good example of the parish council working at its best, I think. So thank you for that. Thank you for your attendance this evening. I wish everybody watching and listening a happy Christmas, happy as it's going to be possible to have in these difficult times, and let's hope for everybody a much happier and more prosperous new year. So that's all from us. Good night for now.
Good night.
Thank you, John.
All right, thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Okay, yeah, the stream's killed now. Great, thanks, John. That was good.